Father, there you are. You must come with me quickly to the council. Posture, my dear child. You are a queen now. You can't just run around the palace like that. You must always be an example and never allow yourself to lose composure like that. But, given the look in your eyes, I think I know what news you bring. We just received word from our scouts. The fleet has been completely annihilated and our enemy started raising one of our colonies. So it is as I expected. Good. How is this good, Father? Our last hope has been destroyed and now billions of our people will die. Our entire race may die for all we know without anyone to defend us. On the contrary, child. But I believe I owe you an apology. When I advised you to send our navy to that outer system, I hoped that our foe will destroy them. I hoped that it will target our frontier colonies first, all to give us this last chance. You hoped that this would happen? Why? Why send millions of people to their deaths like that? What could you possibly hope to gain from this? Time, my dearest daughter. Time. Truth is, our foe has proven time and again that our military is no threat to them. When we fought for the first time, our fleet was decimated. When we tried for the second, it was crippled. Now, it is gone, but at least it drew the enemy away. And while loss of our frontier is a tragedy, its destruction should take long enough for me to finalize my plan. What are you talking about, Father? What hope do we have of surviving this if our only defenders have been turned into space dust? What is this plan of yours, and why do you think that it can succeed where our entire military could not? Because we approached this in a wrong way, my daughter. We never tried to understand the foe we're facing. We tried to treat this attack like it another galactic war, but we were wrong. The enemy we face is neither a conqueror nor a looter. The only goal of our foe is to gain power from us, to turn our people into fuel for its wicked plans. And if we are to survive, then we must become the same. A single-minded entity united in our goal of survival. And how do you want us to do this? Wait, you cannot mean that virus you've been developing. Have you lost your mind and your soul from grief, Father? If you unleash it, it will be the end of our civilization. No, it will be just another step on the path of evolution. Dangerous and misunderstood, perhaps, but necessary if we are to survive. And now, it is ready. But I can't do it without you, daughter. Our people will never accept me to bring it upon them. But you are their queen. They will follow you into hell. But I do not want them to go to hell for me. And that's exactly what will happen if you unleash that virus. You're willing to kill... No, worse, you're willing to turn our entire race into monsters without hope of ever coming back. Yes, because that's the only way our people can survive. I have warned you that this will happen, same as I warned your mother. But you never listened. You never treated this threat seriously, and now we are all paying for it. But it will not matter if we can survive. Guards, is the chamber ready? Good. Then I want you to seize your queen and hold her still. Our survival begins today, with her. What? No, let go of me. I am your queen! Yes, child, you are. And now, with this injection, you will be our queen forever. No, I beg you, Father, anyone but me. I'd rather just die. I saw what this virus did to test subjects. I don't want to become a mindless beast like them. Not beast, my child. Not beast, but salvation. There. It is done. Listen to me carefully now, child. You are now something more. Something stronger. You are all Biluans now, and all Biluans will become a part of you. You will grow, you will thrive, you will become stronger, and thanks to you, our race will survive this calamity. It was an honor to raise a daughter like you. Men, take Her Highness to the chamber. She needs to gather her strength. I will soon arrive with counselors, and we will begin process of unification. Take heart, for today our people triumph. The everlasting light will not eradicate us. Oi, Rook, you fine? Heard you trashing around from my own cabin. What? Yeah, I'm fine. Just a bad dream is all. Wait, what the hell, Bishop? Get the fuck out of my room! No can do, Missy. We're approaching another Biluan colony and General Mantis wants you on the bridge to tell him if there aren't any stragglers left down there. Again? Bloody hell, we did it 3 times already. They're gone, all of them. I thought seeing all these molten drones in Iliant was enough to convince everyone. And it did, but Aspinaka probably thinks it's better to be safe than sorry. Besides, go easy on the guy. You know how his people always go into war with their entire brood in tow, right? Well, General Mantis was no exception. He started this campaign with 17 of his brood brothers and sisters, but it's just him left now. Well, maybe next time they won't throw us into a suicide op like that, now that they've seen what it means. But screw it. Tell him I'll be on the bridge in 5. You tell him yourself. I'm off to sickbay to keep morale up, although we're probably going to have even more work after our troops return home and start explaining why there's so few of them left. The Biluan Mind is gone. After decades of terrorizing its neighbors and after causing billions of deaths all across the stars, the ravenous Biluan hive mind has been eradicated by Commonwealth armies. In a massive operation on an unprecedented scale, our armies have defied all odds, and reason as some survivors claim, landed on the surface of Voice and, withstanding endless counterattacks of hordes of Biluan combat drones, held their ground long enough for our Delver teams to blow the planet itself from inside. And although the explosion itself wasn't enough to completely destroy Voice, it was enough to fully remove its outer infected layer and flood the surface with lava from the planetary mantle, killing the mind in the process. Whether it was just a single entity buried somewhere deep in the biomass or a huge worldwide organism, we will never know, but at the very least we can tell for sure that its destruction was final. And we know that because, as our fleet returned home, we passed next to several other Biluan colonies and found absolutely no signs of life on them. After destruction of Voice, all drones simply melted away, turning into rotten, toxic organic mass, but one that is definitely dead this time. We sent some probes away to make sure, but according to old reports, there are no drones left alive, and the entire Biluan race is just gone in an instant. But, to our surprise, that also means that single drone that somehow managed to break free from the mine some time ago. As you may remember, it was transferred into one of our science ships and, officially at least, used its knowledge to help us with research. Unofficially, however, it was placed under strict observation, in hopes of learning more about its mysterious race. But now it too had melted away, which immediately sparked some suspicions. If it was free, then why it died along with the mind? Maybe it wasn't truly free and was just some sort of semi-independent agent sent to gather information on us. Or maybe the mind simply let it think that it broke free, but still retained some kind of control to use it as an unaware tool in its plans. Once again, we will never learn that, but as soon as this potentially free drone died, its body was vaporized with superheated plasma and then fired into the nearest star, just to be sure. Justified or not, we're not going to take risks. But, of course, the Biluans are not the only casualties of this war. In our attack on Voice, we have lost over 90% of our overall forces, with nearly 2 million soldiers walking away from the battle, out of original 30 million, and that's without counting robots and spiders. Even the man responsible for this plan, General Branitsky, has fallen, as his mech units stayed on the surface to hold off enemy counterattacks while our remaining troops evacuated. Sadly, by this time we only had around 4 million troops left, and only half of them made it to orbit before Branitsky sent overload codes and detonated the planet. So, while victorious, our troops are now completely broken with their morale shaken by the losses they took, which is bad news for our second general, Lopa Spinaka, who barely managed to get off-world himself shortly before detonation. He may not be responsible for developing this suicidal plan, but it doesn't matter. He is the last remaining public face of our army and our highest ranking officer now, so he'll probably have to deal with all the backlash of these devastating losses. Not something he expected when he embarked on this mission, that's for sure. Unfortunately, our losses are not the only problem. After destruction of Voice, our fleet did a sweep of nearby systems to make sure that Biluans are truly completely gone, and then began journey back home, a rather long one since we had to move through Utkavongo space again. But while in Commonwealth people were focused on results of this campaign, both positive and negative ones, other nations were not sleeping, and immediately used the opportunity to fill the vacuum left after Biluan presence was eliminated. The Utkavongo and Ahadis retook some border systems, but as you can clearly see, it was the Shizri Council that got the most out of the mind's destruction. They may be isolationists, true, but that doesn't mean they're against expanding their territory, and from what we've been able to gather, they've been observing Biluan space closely in recent decades, and as soon as they realized what we did in Iliant, they immediately sent thousands of vessels, both private and government ones, to lay claim to the vast majority of this now empty space.
That includes Iliant itself, a place that we wanted to exploit since there is that massive structure there, one that Biluan started to build but were never able to finish. Now though, because it's been claimed by one of the more withdrawn nations in the galaxy, Iliant and many other systems are now lost to us. Not exactly something we wanted to accomplish with this war, but right now there's little that we can do about it, aside from going to war yet again, this time against the Shizri. However, with all the losses we took during last war, our people may be opposed to that idea, though then again, Shizri rapid land grab means that all these casualties we suffered didn't really bring us anything material in return, so perhaps we will respond to their expansion in some way. For now though, we need to regroup and bring our remaining troops home. So, while Manticore moves back into our territory, we can take a look at galactic policies, because a number of major events happened while we were busy in Biluan space, things that will no doubt shape interstellar diplomacy for years to come. First and foremost, we learned that, after several years of conflict, Eternal Empire and Dis Ravagers signed a white peace, which is bad news for everyone because every other nation hoped that they would just fight themselves into extinction. Instead, perhaps afraid of mutually assured destruction, Dis and Imperials backed off, meaning that they can now once again focus on attacking other civilizations that surround them. No doubt they will try to exterminate each other again sometime in the future, but until that happens, we are all in serious danger. Another issue concerns Thradraka's Intent War. As you may remember, a kingdom backed by Thradraka's families attacked one of Intent's states, bringing all these powers to war. Despite being spread out, federal forces managed to outmaneuver Thradraka's fleet, and even took down some of them, which prompted these cannibalistic elves to offer white peace as well, and the Intent took it. But mere months after that truce was signed, that kingdom, Laginchus, and Thradrakas themselves founded a federation together, a celestial alliance. What's worse, they also invited technocratic Fethgran Union to join them, and because these molluscoids are stuck between Empire and Yanari, they accepted the invitation as well. Which is very bad news for our own diplomacy, because in recent years we began far closer cooperation with the Union. Cooperation that we will now have to abandon, because by working with them we would also support Thradraka's families, and that would surely place us at odds with ally-led galactic intent. So, we now have another federation on the scene, clearly opposed to the one we're on good terms with. More than that, losing Fethgran unions means we no longer have any potential allies out there. All we can do is join one of existing federations, a move that would greatly reduce our independence. On the other hand though, all our enemies, the Zdrakan, the Yanari and potentially the Shizri, are standing on their own as well. Perhaps it's an opportunity that we should exploit, in order to ensure our dominant position in the south. But let's end the diplomatic report with a bit of good news. As you could have seen there, Commonwealth politicians have just finalized integrating remnants of Yuri into our nation, which means that, once again, we have gained a planet, and a few billions of new citizens, without having to fight for it. But, as you can clearly see, getting these Yuri to join us is just a first step, and we still have a long walk ahead of us. The only world they have left, Naf Oblal, we'll just call it Naf to make it simpler, is a frontier colony, and a very poorly developed one at that. As was mentioned some time ago, the Yuri mostly house their soldiers there, and the planet itself relies mostly on scavenging economy, with massive sand crawlers combing through deserts of this world in search for resources, while food is provided mostly by hunters and some very primitive farms. And although the Yuri managed to get this planet to become self-sufficient, mostly thanks to the relief mission that we sent along with our representatives, we will still have to work hard to make this planet a decent place to live, because right now it's basically a Wild West-style slum. We're going to have to establish decent agriculture, power production, infrastructure, and, perhaps most importantly, we will have to bring some law here, since right now might makes right on this world, and no wonder considering that majority of the population here are either warriors or nomads. Also, we will have to deal with the fact that while Yuri government accepted becoming part of the Commonwealth, their people are less than thrilled about the idea, since they're not that big on dealing with other species. After suffering so many defeats at the hands of aliens, a decent portion of citizens of this last Yuri planet wanted to distance themselves from galactic policies and, as part of our deal, immediately formed a political party in our council, one that would push forward their isolationist ideals. They don't have the numbers to really make their plans reality, but still they deserve to have their own representatives. And just like with Aramathi all these years ago, it was our good old Professor Nestor Lachinov who decided to become a voice of these Yuri. And, like back then, he will make sure that their opinion is heard, while also trying to convince them that humanity is not as bad as we may seem, and getting these Yuri some decent homes seems like a good first step of this plan. But aside from gaining another world, we also gained access to Yuri sensor stations, and in fact we immediately brought our own equipment to upgrade them, since our tools are far more advanced. And as soon as we installed new sensor arrays on NAV spaceports, we were rewarded by a sight that not one of us expected to see. In a system very close to our new acquisition, there was a massive structure orbiting the local star, though perhaps orbiting is a wrong word, because it was actually so massive that it just formed a ring around said star. Surprised beyond words, our delegation asked the Yuri what the hell this thing was. After all, it was in their former territory, but the Yuri didn't know themselves. They found this system in early years of their galactic travels and were completely astounded by the sheer scale of this structure, but they never managed to get close, as this ring was protected by a group of massive capital ships that completely demolished Yuri early fleet. What they have been able to find, however, was that this structure apparently housed massive life-supporting habitats, ones that could house billions of people and, basically, serve as colonizable planets. So, to put it bluntly, we have found something straight out of science fiction, a ring world, a discovery that immediately sent shockwaves all across our scientific community. Because, aside from being a pinnacle of engineering, this also proves that this galaxy was far more advanced some time ago, because, as it stands right now, not one of current galactic civilizations possesses knowledge and resources to build something like that. So it's a relic of some more advanced past, but that realization only begets more questions. Most important of which is, if a civilization was able to build something like that, then where are they now? Sadly though, we won't be able to get answers to that. After Yuri fell, that ring world ended up in Thadraka's borders, and they probably won't be willing to share its secrets with us. At the very least, we know that they weren't able to take its defenders on as well. But still, the very presence of something so magnificent, so close to our borders, is going to cause our explorers untold amounts of grief. Now though, with another war over and done with, we can return to building up our nation. And in fact, recent years brought even more inventions in the field of geology and metallurgy, as we uncovered another two previously unknown minerals in the void, garanthium and beryllium. Garanthium is a metal that, when refined, becomes extremely dense and resilient, but it is also lighter than durantium that we generally use in our construction. That means that if we were to build, say, a warship from garanthium, it would be far more resilient, while keeping the same mass and size. Beryllium, on the other hand, is a mineral that, when mixed with other compounds, becomes highly explosives, so if we were to add some of it to our explosive weapons, like our antimatter nukes for instance, it would improve their destructive potential even more. So that's what we're going to do, and just like with neutronium some time ago, facilities that will refine both beryllium and garanthium are going to be placed on Curaçao spaceport, which, between its orbital infrastructure and planet-spanning forges on the surface, is now our main military dockyard, able to build vessels far more powerful than any other facility in the Commonwealth. Just think on it for a while. 80 years ago, this place was empty. Today, though, it is a home to over 15 billion people, and a place where factories that span for thousands of kilometers produce goods and weapons that were unimaginable back then. I think it's safe to say that when our first colony ship touched down on this world, nobody expected we would turn it into something like that, especially not its original inhabitants, who themselves are a living proof how far we've came since we first took to the stars. And speaking of colonies, we are now preparing to found another one, on a paradise world of Kodria which, without Biluan threat in the next system over, has now been deemed safe for exploitation. And here's another interesting thing. The vessel that we're sending there from Ortus is named CSV Exodus. That marks another milestone for us, because for the first time since we came into this galaxy, this name has been used to describe something positive. It means that finally, after long years of grieving for a lost birthplace, humanity got over Earth. We still remember where we came from, even though there's not a person alive who actually remembers Earth personally, but now our home is Ortus and this odd small galaxy we're in. We are no longer exiles. If anything, we advanced here more than in any other time in our history and reached heights that we might have never even imagined if we stayed on Earth. Unfortunately, with great advances came great risks, and with great risks came greater losses. And now, as our fleet finally returned to our space, it's time to face the consequences of our latest war. It definitely has been a victory for future generations, who will now be able to grow up without ever-present fear of Biluan invasion. It was a victory for justice as well, as some claimed, for by eradicating the mind we avenged billions of lives it destroyed. But it wasn't that great victory for our own troops, who suffered catastrophic losses, although they have proven just how disciplined they are, considering that they hold on despite overwhelming odds. Still, because of these losses, as soon as Manticore entered Commonwealth space, General Aspinaka has been apprehended by Council's marshals and brought back to Ortus for a hearing. Some people claim that, as Branitsky's second-in-command, he should take responsibility for his late superior's suicidal plan and called for his imprisonment. Others argued that he should step down as a general and withdraw from public life, claiming that he merely followed orders. Some councillors even wanted to use him as a scapegoat to deal with unrest caused by our casualties, but as it happened, the backlash wasn't that severe. Once again, just like after our invasions of New Sajar or Falkabos, the sheer size of our populations meant that those who mourned their fallen were but a tiny fraction, often separated from others who shared their thoughts. After all, Commonwealth now numbers way over 200 billion people, so loss of 28 million is just a drop in the ocean. In the end, Aspinaka was dragged from one hearing to the next for a few weeks, and remained mostly passive and silent during them, but when said hearings were over done with, he retained his title, meaning that he is now, technically, Supreme Commander of our ground forces. Thing is, we no longer have any ground forces. As soon as remnants of our invasion force returned, the Council decided to disband them, claiming that, after everything they've seen on Voice, they do not deserve to be sent into another conflict. Should we decide to rebuild our forces in the future, they are welcome to return, but until then they deserve a bit of rest, and a decent sum of credits as compensation. If only those credits could bring back comrades they've lost. But although our war is over, the rest of the galaxy continues to boil, and soon we receive more bad news. The Dis, who now don't need to worry about Empire, continue their crusade of extermination, and declared war on Hadi Conglomerate and the rest of their federation, Jiren Utkavongo. Seems that these Fangoids really can't catch a break. Now, it's only been a few months since truce between Empire and Dis has been signed, so hopefully these insane shell-faced molluscoids weren't able to rebuild all their forces, but still the balance of power is not looking good for our friends, so we should expect another wave of refugees in the coming years, which means that we'll have to get back to terraforming and colonizing new worlds to make space for them. But that war is not the only news we received. It seems that power struggle in Kingdom of Yadra has reached its breaking point, and one of their 4 remaining planets have revolted against their empress and declared independence under another ruler. This new state, calling itself Enlightened Kingdom of Rata Gas, is ruled by a group of disgruntled nobles led by High Queen Haskendek, who was a duchess of this world before. Now, whether this rebellion was a justified actions against their incompetent empress or just a regular power grab is debatable, but one thing is obvious. This enlightened kingdom seems to be a collection of most radical Carthemas from their nation, once fiercely opposed to all diplomatic deals with other races, and willing to back their ambitions with military force. So, one thing is certain, we will not establish diplomatic relations with these rebels. Shame, because when we heard of this revolution, many councillors thought that we could somehow use it for our own gain. As it stands now, we're just going to ignore it. If Carthemas wants to fight each other in a civil war, then by all means they can do it, because, just like with Utkavongo, we now reached a point where more of them live within our borders than in their own kingdom. Still, this rebellion proves just how weak and divided Yadrans are, an opportunity that may be too good to pass up. For now though, Commonwealth's attention is focused on Galpan system. As you may remember, we found an alien civilization there, a primitive one that seems to be roughly in the middle of Age of Steam. For several years now we've been observing them, and now, with all the data we've been able to gather on them, the Science Council decided that this race, the Buvondon, could potentially become important allies and worthy citizens of the Commonwealth. Of course, they would have to be uplifted first, since even with the rapid industrialization and inventions of Steam Age, a single one of our corvettes could wipe them all out. But in order to advance their knowledge, we will have to contact them, a move that is a bit controversial. Some researchers claim that we should leave them alone and let them develop on their own. Others propose that we should just drop some data caches onto their world and advance their technology indirectly that way. But the vast majority argued that, considering just how chaotic our galaxy is, we should bring this fungoids up to speed as quickly as possible. Because if nothing changes, then one day the Dis will come, and they will not ask questions. They will not debate, no, they will just slaughter these Buvondon to the last, so we should contact them not only to get them to the stars, but also to offer them protection, or at the very least give them enough information to let them protect themselves. Plus, of course, there is a historical reason for this decision. As you remember, back in the old galaxy, we were in the same situation, but we were the ones being observed by the Aramathi. They left us alone though, but no one knows just how things would have gone if they decided to uplift us back then. Maybe we would have found a way to stop the calamity that destroyed both our civilizations. Or maybe not, but still, we're not going to risk the same happening to these fungoids. And so, in late 2289, after long deliberations, a small delegation was sent to the surface of Siskina Tab, and more precisely, to the court of the greatest leader in Buvondon history.
And that is precisely why, lords and ladies of the house, we should not just ignore the opportunity that visit of these cloud creatures presents. They may not seem like much, I'll be the first to admit that, but I believe that establishing an alliance with them could prove beneficial. I beg to differ, Your Highness. Aside from their disgusting appearance, that could probably scare some of our more backward foes, I see no potential benefit in cooperating with them. They do not understand our language, they clearly are timid creatures, just look at them, simply standing there. As representatives, they should boldly present themselves to us and try to overcome the linguistic barrier by gestures or grunts at the very least, and partake in the discussion. But clearly they are also weak. Just look at them draped in these outlandish fabrics. Clearly these pink-skinned visitors from the clouds lack proper fortitude and resilience needed on the surface. An alliance with them would be nothing but liability. I agree with the Marshal, Your Highness. We should sever all our ties with them, refuse them access, and warn our faithful citizens about them. These beings bear a striking resemblance to demons of ancient myths, and I'm sure that you have all noticed that they failed to bow their heads when moving next to the statue of the Prophet. As such, the Church will never accept an alliance with these heathen beings. Then perhaps the Church needs to be reminded of the generous donations it receives each cycle, as well as preferential tax laws that ensure its high quality of life. I appreciate your concern for our spiritual well-being, Great Priest, but I think that you go too far with your denunciations. Look at people of our own empire, the ones living on the southern continent. They were not bowing their heads to the Prophet as well, at least until the day our dearest Queen convinced them to join us. But to bring this conversation back on topic, I must say that, while forming new alliances is always preferable to war, as an Imperial treasurer I am concerned as to how we could profit from such a deal. We do not know what riches these cloud kingdoms may possess, or if they have any worthwhile goods at all in fact. If we are to commit ourselves to a treaty, we must find a way to benefit from it. I see. Thank you, my counselors, for your invaluable advice, and allow me to quiet your doubts here, some of them at least. Great Priest, I have utmost respect for our faith, and I know that pure-hearted believers such as yourself will surely convince these creatures to abandon their wicked ways. Lord Marshal, Lord Treasurer, as for your doubts, I offer only a single word: flight. It is true that these beings may not look like born soldiers, but it is clear that, unlike us, they learned how to move across the sky. Think of it, Lord Marshal. Remember that rebellion in the East 2 cycles ago. Your forces broke it in a single battle, but before that happened you had to spend months marching across the steppes, a time our other rivals could have used to invade our empire. And as for you, Lord Treasurer, I am sure that I don't have to present to you benefits of transporting goods and people across the sky. We already have access to an unprecedented amount of goods thanks to our railroads. We can even enjoy fruits of the sea, here hundreds of kilometers from the shore. Just imagine what more we could do with even faster means of transportation. But nonetheless, I am grateful for your opinions on the matter. I will now retire for the day, and our guests will stay on the lower level under close watch. In the meantime, think hard on what I said, and we will meet each other tomorrow to decide how to proceed. Once again, I thank you, human visitors, for playing along and keeping the guise of unaware fools. And I am sorry that you had to do this, but I'm afraid I had to put on a show for the House of Lords. My advisors are not bad people, but they are all relics of old generation, stuck in the ways of old kingdoms, and they often have problems with accepting things they don't understand. I think I managed to convince most of them though. Profit tends to be universally effective bargaining chip. So once again, thank you for your cooperation, and please accept my deepest apologies for all the unkind words you might have heard out there.
It's no problem at all, Your Highness. We're aware that sometimes diplomacy requires one to just smile and nod no matter what the other side may be saying. But though I am happy that you managed to convince your people, I'm afraid we made a rather poor impression on your great priest, and I wouldn't want to cause any conflict between you and religious authorities.
Do not trouble yourself with that. Like me, he too has a role to play. He can't just openly admit that he's fascinated by your visits, not in public at least, so he talks in opposites, so to speak. Every time he denounced you, he was actually trying to signal that he wants me to commit to our alliance. Of all the people who were in the room, he is the greatest supporter of this idea.
Truly. And I must admit he is a convincing liar. But speaking of lies, I think that I must explain something. We have not came to you from the clouds, but from much, much farther away.
Well, of course you did. Clouds are, after all, just condensation in the air. They couldn't support a piece of paper, let alone an entire civilization. Still, that foolish superstition about cloud kingdoms keeps reappearing every now and then, so I decided to go along with it instead of trying to explain the truth to the entire house. Because, if I'm thinking correctly, you came to us from one of the other planets that we can see in the night sky.
Yes, in a way we did, though it's even more complicated. We did arrive from other planets, true, but ones located near other stars.
I see. Then your journey must have taken extremely long time. But I've been meaning to ask, why did you take so long to come down here to us? Do not try to deny it. We know that you were up there for some time at least. My astronomers noticed a new object in the sky around 20 cycles ago. I assume you moored your flying machine there, but in that case, why did you take so long to approach us?
Apologies, Your Highness, but the truth is that we wanted to observe you first, to learn as much as we could about you. Today, though, I can clearly see that we underestimated you.
You're not the first ones to do so, human, because we already had visitors from up there before, though they were not nearly as civil as you are. Some time ago, population of few towns north of here has just vanished without a trace. My investigators found signs of combat and a body, which is why I brought you here to this basement, to see if you could tell me something about it. It's not one of yours, that's for sure, and it is badly decomposed after all the years, but perhaps you could still recognize it. There it is.
Let's see. I don't need its face intact to know what this creature is, Your Highness. The markings on its armor are clear enough. The corpse before you belongs to a Yanari, which means that people from those towns you mentioned have probably been abducted and enslaved by them. Seems to me, Your Highness, that amongst other things, we now share a common enemy as well.
So, it seems that our initial delegation was successful, and although we weren't greeted with open arms, at the very least we managed to achieve our goal without resorting to hostility. That was just the first step though. We can't just walk in and bring the Buvondon to the stars in one day. Before they join galactic society, they must first breach the massive technological gap between our civilizations, and they need to do it properly and go every step of the way along the same path we and other nations took. So, we will help them invent electricity, flight, combustion, then computing, rocket engines and modern medicine, and then, the final test, the nuclear fusion. And then, only then, once we know for sure that they understand the knowledge we gave them, we will show them how to leave their world and reach the stars. So, as you might expect, it's going to take some time, but the Buvondon are already in the middle of technological revolution that came with Steam Age, so our efforts should bring fruit within reasonable time. So, with technological enlightening of Buvondon underway, we can get back to our main goal. As you remember, we are currently stockpiling resources to start construction of a sentry array, a massive station that, according to our engineers, should give us sight over the entire galaxy. But before we can begin this project, we need a place to test our various sensor technologies that we will use in it, and to that end, we have constructed a smaller compass station on the border between us and our old rivals of Zrakan Union.
and thanks to that, we now have a decent line of sight into their territory, so not only we have a proof that our sensors are sufficiently advanced, but we also gain an unprecedented chance to take a closer look at that mysterious civilization and potentially learn something about them. Also, the very place where we built Compass Station is quite interesting because it's not actually a star system. Instead, what we have here is just a lonely extrasolar gas giant and its moons, probably thrown out of some nearby star system by some gravitational shenanigans. But this is exactly why we used it to house this observation station, because it is just a tiny rock in the endless void of black space, so unless you know it's there, finding it would be nearly impossible. Back to the Zrakan though, we can now take a look at the homeworld of Zrag, an odd planet with methane-based atmosphere, something that completely baffles our researchers on many levels. For one, it is difficult to imagine how advanced life developed on a planet like that, and considering the amount of said methane, it's a miracle that this world hasn't turned into a massive fireball yet. Still, it may be weird and inhospitable to us, but to Zrakan it's home, and as you can see, it's a pretty well-developed home, full of advanced infrastructure and massive continent-spanning megacities, and, of course, temples. Though we only have observation data, it's obvious that this cult of everlasting light completely dominates Zrakan society. Its symbols adorn nearly every building, its temples are located practically everywhere, and there are dozens of massive temple complexes that could rival our own cities in size. Even the very flag of their nation is a symbol of light, a clear sign that, unlike in the Commonwealth, for Zrakan Union, state and church are one and the same thing. Their parliament looks like a cathedral, their leaders are, without exception, high priests of their faith, and, from what we can tell, even daily life of regular citizens is more of a religious procession than anything else. So, now that we have an opportunity to observe them, it may be a good idea to start trying to make sense of this weird civilization. Because despite all the losses they took and all the wars they lost, it seems that Zrakan Union is prospering, a commendable resilience, if not for the fact they want to brainwash all of us. Meanwhile, back home, directors of the Expanse project have once again approached our citizens in hopes of finding an idea on how to improve our nation-spanning initiative once again. Except this time, the debate was over almost as soon as it began. While there were quite a lot of supporters of establishing either cybernetics or order branches, they were all swept aside when Professor Tanwa presented a project that she and her entire Bioshock division was working on. A highly experimental science, but if successful, it could give us enormous benefits, not to mention it would greatly enhance our prestige on galactic scene. And when this project was presented, the vast majority of our people decided to back it, leading to creation of new experimentalism branch, a section of Expanse project that will keep an eye out for revolutionary ideas, no matter where they may come from, and strive to make them reality. Now, as for what Professor Tanwa presented, we'll take a look at her work once it's finished, but one thing can be said for sure, it's going to cause some serious shockwaves, both inside and outside of our borders, because even now, before it is completed, this discovery completely changed our very idea of life. Shortly afterwards, however, we were quickly reminded that, despite our pursuit of knowledge, the galaxy beyond our borders is not a pleasant place. In July of 2090, our border stations have picked thousands of vessels moving towards our territory from Ahadi space. At first, we expected this armada, but when we realized that these ships belong to private Ahadis, we thought that we're looking at another wave of refugees. Instead, we were greeted by a message from leadership of Ahadi conglomerate itself, in which they explained that, now that we finally share a common border after Biluans are gone, their profit-oriented citizens would like to establish trade relations with us. At first, it seemed suspicious, but then our councillors realized that this is a perfect opportunity to improve our relations and make some credit on the side at the same time. So, after a quick session, the council opened that border to our merchants as well. The government will establish its own trade deals, but our citizens will also have an opportunity to begin exchange with private parties on the Ahadi side. Trade is, after all, lifeblood of civilization, so we shouldn't obstruct it, otherwise people will inevitably turn to smuggling. Although, in this particular case, the situation was a bit more complicated. Long story short, it turned out that vast majority of Ahadis who rushed our borders were, to put it bluntly, scammers, selling defective goods or just random pieces of garbage presented as exotic alien artifacts. They hoped to flood our market with their trash in a sort of a massive get-rich-quick scheme on a national scale, but they failed to realize that two can play this game. Turns out that many of our own traders who went into their space were selling trash as well, and in the end our mutual scams kinda equalized themselves, with no notable gains or losses for either side. And so, both Commonwealth's Council and Ahadi Board of Directors decided to completely ignore the whole affair and go back to business like nothing happened. Though, considering the official message they sent us after their merchants returned, it seems that we quite impressed them with our own lack of morality in trade. Now, if only they would put the same amount of energy into fighting the Dis.
Construction project complete.
Still, trade conflicts are preferable to actual bloody ones, but unfortunately our neighbors seem to disagree, as we receive news about yet another war. Once again, leaders of Yannari League have decided to gain more power, wealth and slaves by invading territory of galactic intent. Except this time, it seems that they didn't actually underestimate the Alir and their allies. See, Yannari fought the Intent twice already, and each time they were defeated. This time, however, they are not attacking alone. Instead, they somehow convinced Miravandia Hegemony to join them, which means that Intent is going to be attacked from two sides. Alir themselves are in the worst situation because they're the most exposed at this point, but perhaps we shouldn't worry too much about them. They may be peaceful, but together with some Drithans and Beldros, they proved enough times that attacking them is a dangerous proposition. So, we're gonna keep an eye on this war, not only because, as always, we do not want Yannari to win, but also because it presents us with several opportunities. Of course, for now, all projects are on hold. Because we had to stockpile resources needed to start construction of Sentry Array, the past few years were rather uneventful, something that both the Council and citizens themselves were actually quite grateful for. But now, the long wait is over, and as our construction vessels gather in orbit of Arvo, it's time for us to take yet another step on a long path of understanding our current situation. It's time to start building that Sentry Array. Originally, the plan was to begin construction in former Yadran Bardigan system, since it's placed furthest to the north and closest to the galactic core, but with Dis on the move again, that idea was scrapped, and instead our construction crews, led by our very first CSV developer, are going to start building in Opshala system. Not only will that place their construction site close to our main mining world of Arvo, and greatly shorten supply lines, it would also ensure its safety, because any enemy who would try to mess with our Astromasons would first have to deal with the Merit Citadel. And so, in April 2293, the first bulkheads of what would one day become our greatest observation station were placed in orbit of Star Opshala, and although they may not seem too impressive right now, they will surely become a sight to behold in the coming years. But that is just the first one of two major events that happened in the first half of this year. Shortly after CSV Developer began construction, the Bioshock division organized a press conference on Ortus Spaceport and unveiled the final result of research backed by the Expanse project. On the scene, aside from Professor Tanwar and around a dozen other researchers of various races, stood an alien creature, one unlike any other people of the Commonwealth have ever seen. And as the press representatives took their places, the creature bowed down and began to speak. "Good day, fellow citizens," it said in perfect Orton. "I am the final result of Bioshock Division's Project Zero, and I am alive. Not a clone, not a droid, a living, breathing, thinking creature, like humans, like Kithris, like Aramathi, and like so many others. But unlike you, I was not born. Instead, I was created from a handful of cells in a laboratory here on this station. I have been told that the process was difficult and time-consuming, but considering that I am here in front of you now, ultimately worth it. After I was created, I was told that our Commonwealth, has mastered nature in recent years, that we can transform barren worlds into habitable planets able to sustain billions of people, that we can delay aging for time that would be unthinkable before. And now, with me being the living proof of that statement, we can create life from scratch. And not just some primitive life, not bacteria or microbes, but truly advanced races like you or me. But this is not the end. We might have mastered nature, we might have mastered life, but one goal still remains. We must still conquer death itself. Hey, look who decided to finally show up. Barbot, bottle of Zonam 77 meat for our incognito Prime Minister. Stat. Bloody hell, man, you look like shit. And you look like a coward who fled and left me with largest mess in human history, you asshole. But make it 2 bottles. Good to see you again, man. Truth be told, you don't look so good as well. Your dear wife has been riding you that hard. Please don't call her like that. Besides, I'm a bit older than you, so I have the right to look awful. Especially since I don't have government paying for my annual gene therapies. Yeah, you only have access to the person who develops them. How is it, Hira, by the way? I haven't seen her in months, and last time I did, she stormed right in the middle of the council session and stole quarter of the room for some debriefing in her lab. You're surprised by that? She's almost done with the greatest project in her career, hell, maybe the greatest one in her entire history. It's one thing to create bacteria in the lab, but making actual developed beings capable of thoughts and communication, now that's something that truly requires dedication and outlandish amounts of wisdom. That's why she has her entire division on this project, and she even has me running experiments all the time. That would explain why you look like that. When was the last time she let you sleep? Not sure. 7, 8 days ago maybe. We've been running on stimulants for the majority of past year, so it's all kinda turned into a blur. Doesn't matter though. If we can get this project to work, then we will collect dividends for centuries to come. Can't disagree here. We could develop any species suited for any kind of work and specialized Commonwealth on an unprecedented scale. A race of builders, a race of soldiers, a race of researchers. Well, maybe not that last one. Wouldn't want to get replaced all of a sudden. True, but we are still far away from developing life that could truly dwarf ours. And once we can, we should also be able to improve ourselves as well. So you shouldn't worry about us becoming obsolete anytime soon. Although, with all the funding from Sign-On Financial Solutions, we will get there much, much faster. I think this man's last will should be placed in a museum and paraded as something that caused more scientific progress than any other single object in history. Though I still wonder what caused him to give half of his fortune to science divisions. He's never been the one to hoard wealth. If he saw a potential for investment, he did just that. Besides, let's not forget that Science Council made him. Before Tesla, he was just some random geology professor, but after Kuo told me about his ideas for energy credits, I pulled him from the mission and got him into Ministry of Finances, where he basically built our entire financial infrastructure from ground up. Plus, I heard that he had some personal reasons for investing in our research, something about his late wife, though I don't know the details. So no wonder he decided to invest half of his reserves in science. And the way I hear it, his granddaughter who runs the family now is thinking along the same lines. So it would seem. Alright, let's pour another one. Okay, I can see you still have something in your mind, so out with it. Get it out of your system so we can enjoy your one annual free evening. Right. See, I've been thinking a lot about all these wars lately. The Ahadis and their team are not going to win in the north. They put on a brave show, sure, but all reports claim that Dis are stomping them at every step. They probably won't take out their federation in this one war, but sooner or later they will fall, and without Ahadis and Utkas to the north, we'll be next. Well, we could join them and help them kick those shell-faced bastards back where they came from. And how do you view our chances in such war? Poorly. We could probably take this out in a defensive war, if we invested heavily in Phalanx border stations, but I don't think Manticore could take the fight to them, even with help of our northern friends. Indeed. So we need to get stronger. We need to secure our position, shorten our borders, and ensure our backyard is safe. And we actually have a good opportunity to do so right now. The war between Yanarian and Tent. But after everything that happened in Biluan space, I'm not sure our citizens would be willing to commit to another war so soon. Which is why I'm asking for your opinion. You know, probing out a bit. Honestly, it actually may be a decent idea. We could use it to secure a path to Yuri space, and maybe even establish border between us and Fedgrans. Or we could go for the Miravandian allies and completely secure northern part of the galaxy. Both options sound good, certainly better than just sitting here doing nothing. I see. Thanks for that. Would you mind coming to the council sometime next week to say it publicly? You know, I could get you a press conference or something. Sure, why not? Just make sure you want... Wait. Oh, you piece of shit, you wanted to start lobbying for this war all along and just wanted to hear me confirm it. Bloody hell, man, that's the reason why people were always afraid of you, even when we were kids. You think you have your own opinion, but then nope, turns out you were thinking exactly what Ishii wanted you to think all along. Good thing you're not a psionic, or you would have been a monster. Ah, but to hell with it, I at least owe you this much, so call me when that conference is ready. And now, finish up your glass, and we'll take that second bottle with us. Commonwealth won't fall apart if you relax for one day. The galaxy can wait. Tonight, two Yalchan nerds are going to hit the movies.